Yeah, I voted against. Because
Call the regional school committee in session.
I voted in favor of leaving.
And
Yes,
we always
yes.
start off with community comments. Do we have any tonight? Does not appear so. The parking protesters, I guess, decided not to rally this evening.
I was told to nod if they.
And this month, since this is our second meeting of the week, and we got pretty extensive reports from both our headmasters, we'll just open up the item number 3 to any questions that people may have. And, oh, John did want to add anything. Okay.
Yeah, just real quick, thank you, Mr. Lee. I just wanted to give the regional school committee an update in regards to NEASC. I know that for a few different meetings, the question has been asked. So, in your packet, I believe, was included an email that came from Dan Richards, who's the principal of Belmont High School, and John Sills, who's the superintendent of Bedford Public Schools. They also were basically the co-authors of a letter that had been sent to NEASC and Janet Allison with concerns about the NEASC process, the time, the amount of money, the resources, etc. So they have been working as the liaisons to principals and superintendents as NEASC has been making some of their adjustments and reforms in the accreditation process. So I included that email, which was sent to all member schools who belong to NEASC, as to, you know, what their tenor is, what their impression is of some of those changes. In conjunction with that, George Edwards, who is the new director for NEASC, who replaced Janet Allison, who retired, called me that same day and set up a meeting with me, with Ann Keegan, Keith Kaplan, and Gretchen Donahue. Keith Kaplan and Gretchen Donahue are members of our, the co-chairs of the last committee. And we are going to be meeting next Thursday. Dr. LeDuc is going to be joining us as well. They have a presentation that they're going to be showing us, Mr. Edwards is, about some of the reforms that NEASC has made. They're going to go over some of the crosswalk documents. I have seen some of the paperwork for that. They're going to talk about how they have really tried to align it with Common Core and also modify it so that it's more reasonable. And there's supposed to be a financial gain by districts as well. He's going to present that material. So after that meeting, I will then convene a meeting with the superintendent, Mr. McAuliffe and I, and Dr. LeDuc will have a conversation about what we see as next steps in terms of the self-study process. There's a pre-self-study process, the self-study process, and then an actual visit. One of the things that the high school will have to do is change from a mission statement to a core value statement. It's not earth-shattering, but it has some different tenets to it, so we're going to have to take some time to look at that. We did do that exercise last year with some input, some feedback, and we'll have to continue to go back to that. So that's really where we are. We're finally seeing some traction and some movement, and we'll be getting some answers. And I was really pleased that George Edwards is reaching out to schools and coming personally to schools to explain their process.
That sounds good.
Yeah, I was encouraged.
Been waiting a long time.
Yeah.
Thanks, John. One of the interesting pieces, it appears that the, what has been their standard visit format will be quite different. Fewer people and much less time of visiting a team on site, which
Makes it a little less honest.
And they're going to go to an online portal. That'll be the other thing that's going to show us. In the past, we've had to create numerous binders. And believe it or not, you had to dedicate in your building for those supplies. So a lot of times people were reconvening and changing closets, and sometimes, you know, offices were moved around. So that will obviously change too, looking to go to a paperless environment.
That's fantastic.
How long would the previous format visit take?
The visit, they would come on a Sunday and they would leave on a Wednesday. And so on Sunday we would have a gathering. It was a lot of hoopla. We would bring some of our top programs, and it was nice to showcase the things that the school was doing. But I think it really put a lot of additional pressure and work on people. And I think what they're looking to do is make it a school week visit, where they would consolidate it. They still have the same strands that they would be looking at: curriculum instruction, assessment, leadership, community, and school funding issues. But they are certainly looking to have it be a much more effective, streamlined process and not a gigantic show.
So, John, two of the questions I have. One is in this new format, not that you know the answers to these, but just these are the questions. What's the added value of having an ASC? Yeah. That clearly, I think that's still an open question, and I think it would be important for me at least, to hear after that meeting what you think. And then the other is, it's nice that you're going to streamline the visit, but also what's the pre-visit time commitment in terms of total number of person hours, which has really been quite onerous. And that letter was very encouraging, but it's not necessarily something that you can take to the bank. It would be nice to know what their expectations.
Yeah, I would agree with Robinson. I'm cautiously optimistic, and I do think that after we meet, first I'm going to meet with Mr. Edwards, Dr. LaDuke and I will meet with Mr. Edwards, and then the two faculty members will join. Then we will set up a formal meeting with Mr. Collins to review all of that, and then I'm sure that they'll ask for me to report out at a future regional school committee meeting our findings, and then weigh the options with you.
And did I read Burlington and somewhere else has gone through this?
They are piloting this year, that is correct.
So you'll have some feedback.
Yes, and in fact, I know the contact at Burlington is Patrick Larkin, who I know well, and he was adamant that they changed. So I think the fact that they've made these moves, I think really does show some traction, and we'll be quite honest. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you. We'll move on to our monthly financial report.
Effective of the monthly financial report, pretty much the same things that you saw the last time. I guess in the interest of saving time for the budget process, the highlight is the $236,000 salary variance to the good and the $245,000 expected surplus in the health insurance account.
And we'll also be tracking for a favorable variance in our transportation account only that will be dispersed initially.
Exactly, that's already there, you can see that.
Do we have any questions or?
Can I ask a question? Is that
Sure.
allowed? So are we fairly confident those are going to be real savings this year? That the healthcare is a real number
As of right
and
now, yes.
the salary is a real
Barring
number?
catastrophe, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Actually, I have a question. You're welcome to say no. Is there a way to do an expectation on here? I mean, so the columns are very useful, the balance and the encumbrance, but I never know, looking at those, how much of what isn't yet encumbered we're likely to spend at this point of the year. Is that possible, or is that really
It's
just
possible, you can do that.
darts on the board? That would actually be extremely helpful.
So out of budget remaining, some of it is expected to stay at the end and some will be,
That's right.
like our spring salaries and things like that,
Obviously,
right?
that's what we want.
Yep.
Or whatever.
Or the balance of our current run rate for healthcare, things of that nature.
That seems like the kind of figure that we would want for our meeting on the 24th. To the extent that we have any insight into it.
Well, that will feed into the.
Right, exactly. I think it will inform our discussion on the 24th.
Oh, good, I don't want to feel like we're racing because this next item I think is where we're going to hit the mud. So we're ready to move on to item number 5, which is continuing discussion of the FY17 proposed budget.
Thank you, Michael. Before we get
And
to, oh, I'm
We
sorry.
get the papers distributed out to other folks, so the additional copies that we just got.
Before we get to the FY17 budget, there's just a few other items related to FY17. Well, before we even get to 17. So in your packet is some information regarding the FY15, FY16 capital programs. And Hans, will you just take a few minutes to walk the committee members through these two spreadsheets?
Yeah, the capital projects fiscal year, the 2014, 2015 is on the top of this one sheet, and on the bottom you've got this current status of 15, 16. As you can see in 14, 15, most of the projects are closed out, save for the one that was labeled masonry doors and WWTF. That was the 83,373 capital project, and that's broken down into sublines down below. The masonry portion of it is complete. The doors and the halls and doors we'll get to in a second, and the wastewater treatment plant piece of it is also complete. The door piece of this is the old Rentless door project that was deferred. So again, we've not started that project, and as of right now, that money is basically held in reserve pending project initiation when that may start.
So on that one in particular, I thought around September when we talked about this, or October, we thought that we were going to revisit Lindquist, not just from a doors perspective, but from a whole series of issues that should be addressed at the same time. And I think if that's still our current recommendation from the sub-capital committee, it seems to me to make more sense to close this out in return and then come back with the full package again, whenever that's going to be.
So the only question is, between now and then, would we have to do something to the doors? Because we don't know when and if there will be a Right.
Right. And that was that was a point of discussion when the subcommittee was meeting, and we did ask Mr. Kelly to provide us with an assessment as to whether he felt that would be necessary, and his response was no. That while they will need at some point in the near future to be replaced, or depending on what happens in that building, move somewhere else or whatever. But we're good for we're good for next year certainly. So we don't anticipate the need to do any repairs.
Right. And so if nothing comes of it, it could come back on another capital project.
Yes.
If
Yes.
it comes back,
Yes.
if it comes back, my understanding it needs to come back, not just the doors, but
The frame.
the whole frames.
Exactly.
And it's a significantly more expensive project, but one that would be done together.
No, so let me be more clear.
Additional
Right.
decisions.
The conversations evolved to the concept of starting to get information that suggested that particular building, Lindquist Commons, may need extensive work, more work than just the doors being replaced. And it's related to what's happening in the kitchen, how that's configuration of the current cafeteria. There's some concern about the auditorium and the size of it. And so the plan is to put a group together before the end of this year, representative group of the users of that space, to have a couple of conversations and develop a pro forma plan to try to understand how much money would be necessary to do a feasibility study for all of the needs of that building. And we were concerned that if a feasibility study came up with a plan that suggested there was more major work that needed to be done, and perhaps a reconfiguration of that building meant maybe the doors are somewhere else and not where they are. We didn't want to spend $128,000 to do that work without further vetting that very carefully.
So we're confident there'll be some group of folks here before the end of the year then to propose something around a study and preliminarily what their concerns are.
Yeah, the work the discussions, the meetings technically will be to provide the capital subcommittee with some information so that when the capital subcommittee meets to look at FY18, the FY18 plan, the committee members will have a better idea on what number to include and what the scope of a feasibility study might in fact be. And with the notion that the feasibility study would be funded as part of the FY18 capital plan.
So, Michael, do you need a motion from us to
Well,
You don't
So-
wait till that work is done.
Well, so the purpose of having this on the agenda was timely, especially given that you'll be asked to vote to approve the intermunicipal agreement for FY17. And you may recall that the wording of the IMA says that any unused funds for the capital projects that have been approved under that IMA will be returned to the two communities. So we wanted to, we felt it was timely to look at this. So I think, I'm not sure if it's the amount that would be returned isn't 50,000, it's some other number.
Well,
Isn't the budget balance column?
Right. I'm sorry, Carol.
It sounds like, because I mean, there's also money that's, you're not always exactly over under budget, right? So there's extra money from other projects. It sounds like under going with the IMA, we don't have to make a motion, it just automatically reflects back to the town once we approve it.
But we would have to authorize somebody.
We're obligated to do it.
Right.
But we have to do it, we don't have to make a motion because we have to do it. If it's not used, it goes down.
Yeah, but we're making the decision whether we're doing it or not doing it. That's all.
Okay, I see what you're saying, I thought we had already.
We can decide what
Got
we
it.
do.
Right.
Got it.
Yeah.
I think we should vote to close, accept the report and vote to close out 2014, 2015. And then we have minutes that would identify that project was not taken on for the following reasons and will be revisited as we look at other needs for Lindquist next year.
Did you want to do that vote today?
I think so, just in the spirit of it's in front of us, let's not have it ever come back again.
What's that, sir?
The walls and doors.
Right.
There's money to, right?
The
Right, so the
Lindquist,
high school walls and doors, was that,
These
Considered-
four below.
that was never started because my understanding at the time was we put doors together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we were going to do Lindquist and then we were going to do doors over at the high school.
So do we need
do we keep, have
Well,
to,
can we ask a question? So, Hans, do we know exactly what that $13,083 was for high school walls and doors? And why that portion of that amount was not expended?
I'll have to go back and I don't know the answer right now.
okay, so it sounds like we should resolve,
Evan next?
yeah,
I think so.
resolve them together as
Yeah.
opposed to doing it one-on-one.
Right.
Then we can close it. So it'll either close out at 50 or at 65.
No, at 84 or look at the number at the top. Because we have all these other items that are completed and we had unspent balances.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, sorry. Yeah.
No, because
So-
that's just.
So for next, for the 24th, then we'll have clarity on that item.
On what that number should be.
Even though I thought we put them together, they were gonna travel together, and we're canceling them together.
All right, so you'll come back with this.
Okay,
But we're amenable to the other day.
so on to
2015.
the current year.
So current here down below is an update on the 15-16 projects. The detail gives you a status on all of these projects. Number 7, sorry, there's a mistake there. That should read carpeting in middle school, library, high school main office, high school guidance office, and auditorium. And again, the status there being it's complete except for the high school library, which has not been done yet, and the auditorium. There was some confusion around what was in the Dover warrant book, but this is the way that it was submitted. It's middle school and high school. Okay. So again, the second well in the spring. Middle school gym still needs to be painted. The generator was recommissioning was completed. The crack filling in the campus lots and the sidewalks was completed. The exterior light, LED, middle school maintenance light. The LEDs are finished. The entrance light to the middle school entrance is still in process. The visual alert system, this is the warning system for areas in the high school and the middle school that
The LED,
exactly,
the
on
strobe
can't hear,
lights.
so the strobes
Yeah.
go off on their computers. And when I look back at this, for someone, I think they for some reason they wanted to jump on this early.
Yes,
They actually got this done. They charged it to appropriations.
Yes.
So there's really nothing I can do with this because the books for 15 are closed.
Right.
So that was actually purchased out of FY 15 appropriation money.
Right.
Okay.
right, so that'll end up flowing back.
That'll end up flowing back.
Right.
The carpeting, again, we got the high school library left in the auditorium. The refurbishment of the gym doors, that's complete, and the replace the existing high school gym dividers, that's complete also.
So just to be clear on item 5, the exterior lighting upgrade, we do not have a final, we've not paid final invoices.
Right.
Is that correct?
But overall, for the projects that are underway or finished, we're consistently having favorable outcomes relative to what we forecast.
Forecast.
Okay, that seems to have been the case in the prior set projects.
Yes.
So I think that gives us some confidence around those numbers that are still in, that we've been working off of in the on-site insight report are still effective guides, if anything, conservative.
Michael, if it's voted to close out that account and the money, 65,000, has to go back to the towns. Now, I can't remember whether we financed that with cash or borrowing at this point because it was a while ago. But so I get it if it's cash. But what happens if we borrow? Do you know?
I think we would have to go back to bond counsel since this was his construct.
That
I
one-
don't think you did borrow though.
I thought
think
you
it was-
borrowed-
I have
I thought you
no
borrowed
idea
in
at this
14,
point. I
15,
can't
and paid
remember.
cash
I-
15, 16.
I think this was still covered, their share was still covered,
Oh.
not borrowed.
15, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Mike,
So we would, I think, since both
I'm
the
just wondering
region,
how it would
both
work.
the region and Sherborn share the same bond counsel and Rick Manley, I would go to him because this really was his deal structure.
but remember, under the IMA, the two towns determine how they'll raise the funds for their share. So even if Sherborn did borrow for their share in 14-15,
Right,
you borrowed it and the money was sent to the district.
right.
So we would still send the money back, and then
Oh,
bond council
okay.
will determine
Right.
how Sherborn
Okay.
handles
Yeah.
those
So
funds.
Sherburne would
In
get
terms of
cash
this.
back
Correct.
then? Okay, that's all I.
Yeah, that would be my
Okay.
expectation, and
Okay.
it's up
That makes
to,
sense.
Okay.
up to your accounting department to figure out the
Yep.
correct way to handle it.
Yeah. No, sure, that's.
Okay, thanks.
And
So one suggestion, so we'll wait till the next meeting to vote on both years. We'll have an actual number for 15-16 to put on the table at that time, or Well, I guess my question is, do you send back what's complete, or do you wait till all of the projects are complete?
I
For
would,
15-16, we've got the projects which
That
are
are
not
still-
completed. by
Yeah.
that
That's
date.
right, that's
I
right.
don't want to send that one
I think
back.
that's right.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's
No,
right.
I think that makes sense, that's why I wanted to clarify.
what it might be is it might be we get into a habit of doing it every June. We
Yeah.
look at, if all the projects are done by June, that's our time at which we
Close
vote
things
to
up.
close things out, and it goes back to the towns in June. So it's before the end of the fiscal year.
Do we have bids in place on the well? And it's just waiting for the work to be done? Pardon?
We're getting close.
Getting quotes?
Yeah.
So we'll move on to 2017, and I don't think we need to, unless people have any other questions. Yeah,
Nope, all good.
okay. So we're now ready to have a motion on the IMA, correct? So does anyone want to propose a motion
Can you
to,
tell me what to say? And I'll work on it.
I'm not the motions expert, to
Okay, Richard,
approve
you want to
the,
make a motion to approve the intergovernmental agreement as presented to us this evening for the upcoming fiscal year?
That's my motion.
Second,
any questions about the IMA process?
Dover-Sherborn.
So both boards of selectmen have voted and approved and signed off on the IMA for FY17.
And what we'll do after we have our vote is then start to pass around the documents because everyone gets to participate in this. So, any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
No opposed? Thank you. This is now starting to
I
become
was gonna say,
almost
thank you,
routine.
Dover and Sherborn
Yeah.
for making this,
exactly.
smooth
Yeah,
process.
we can answer to you.
It also then makes returning money even easier. Okay.
And you can start on the budget as I get.
I will, Michael, thank you. What I'd like to do is first just very quickly identify some additional information that was handed out prior to the meeting. And as the discussion moves forward, I'm sure we'll be revisiting these. So the first handout is the detailed breakdown of assessments based on 4 new pieces of information. The first is related to the little over $500,000 in proposed adjustments to the first pass budget. You've received information about that in your packet. Second piece of information that is provided in this detailed breakdown that is different from the first pass is that these details include the governor's proposed FY17 budget as it relates to Chapter 70 aid, Chapter 71, that's transportation aid, and a new calculation which comes from the state of the minimum local contribution, which is a part of the calculation for determining each community's assessment. So I'm sure we'll be revisiting that. The second sheet is related to the $250,000 adjustment that is being proposed for the insurance line, the health insurance line. So this sheet here, it's called Health Insurance Adjustments for FY17 Budget, breaks down the really 4 different components of that one budget line. The line is called active insurance, but it includes the cost, premium cost for active employees, the premium cost for retired employees, the Medicare contribution. So virtually all of our employees, probably all of them, pay 1.45% of their salary towards to Medicare, and the district, like municipalities, are responsible for matching that. So that's that 1.45% number. And then extending out into FY17 is this component called budgeted plan changes. For FY16, there is money that was put into the FY16 budget to cover employees who were not covered by health insurance in FY15, but might have made a decision to move to the district's insurance plan in FY16. So we've gone through, we've vetted FY16 very carefully, and as a result of that, we have a new figure for that line item, which is a little more than $3.1 million. And the four different components are broken out, and we can discuss that in more detail when we get to that. But I thought it was important that you have the backup for that large adjustment. And then also in your packet this is really just informational, is the sheet. It's a back-to-back sheet for you, but it details the state aid based on Governor Baker's proposal for his FY17 budget. And then the last piece of information, we provided you with version 2 of the big line item budget. This version 2 reflects that 501,000 plus in proposed adjustments. And those are detailed on this. You'll find those new numbers in red as you go through the line items. So that is that. Also in your packet is a listing of those lines where we've proposed adjustments. And I'm happy to quickly go through those and give you a quick rationale as to why we're proposing those adjustments.
That'd be great.
All right,
Yes, please.
so let's start with that.
So that's the sheet that looks like this.
That's correct, sir. That's this sheet here.
Did you get past
So
the
one of the new
IMA?
ones?
It's one of the, no, it's in the packet, the big fat, right after the
Yeah.
IMA and the big
It's
fat
in the
packet.
packet related to agenda item number, agenda item number 5.
Thanks.
So currently, what we're proposing is a reduction of $15,000 from the superintendent reserve line. Currently budgeted at $30,000. Again, looking back on the expenditure experience over the last few years, and so far this year, I feel comfortable that that level of cut at this point is appropriate. It does still leave us with the ability in the next budget year at that level to be able to fund any unknown emergency expenses that come about. And so that's the thinking behind that. The $25,000 reduction in the high school teacher longevity line, as well as the $25,000 in the middle school teacher longevity line. The first pass budget was holding $5,000 payments. They're called, in the contract, in the teacher's contract, they're called early retirement payments. And there's other language that describes how a bargaining unit member qualifies for such payment. And there's also language that speaks to certain deadlines for notification in order to be eligible to receive that payment beyond the other eligibility requirements. And I noted that budgeting these placeholders, if you will, has, I know in the past, created some lively conversation and caused questions about, how much of that should we, should we budget? We don't know. So I worked with the Dover-Sherborn Education Association president to take a look at that language, and as the joint committee reviewed the other night, both sides agreed to change the language in the contract, which allows for that payment to be made basically in the subsequent fiscal year. So what will happen in the future is, in order to be eligible for the payment, you have to notify the central office by October 1st of your intention to retire at the end of the school year. And once we receive those notifications, we'll put those notifications in our budget folder, and we'll know, because we can now make those payments in the following fiscal year, we'll know exactly how many, if any, we need to budget. So at the region, there are no staff who are retiring this year at either the high school or the middle school, or at least they haven't given us notification by the deadline. So the budget assumes going forward that there's not a funding requirement to make that payment, certainly for next year. So that's the genesis of those two reductions. In terms of school committee negotiations, it's clear that line has been used perhaps for a few different reasons in the past. I know one of the reasons, how shall I put this? In a budget negotiation year, there have been funds put in that line in anticipation of the outcome of budget negotiations. That will be the case. That won't be the case for next year. However, during next year, early on in the fiscal year, we anticipate that negotiations for a successor agreement to the current collective bargaining agreement will begin. And so what I'm proposing is that's the line that should fund the cost for the expenses to conduct those negotiations, as opposed to, and in the future even, as opposed to what might be expected to be the outcome of those negotiations. So the amount that's left in that line based on this cut is about $12,000. In the past, the negotiations have been conducted using a collaborative and cooperative approach. One of the main costs for that negotiation was the payment for services of a mediator. And if that process continues, that's where it would come from. We do not anticipate that the mediator's cost would be $12,000. However, I feel that it makes sense that if, for some reason, negotiations are conducted in a different way. So if there's a move away from collaborative bargaining to more traditional bargaining, then what the school committees would expect is that their legal counsel would be very involved in that process. And so the $12,000 pays for about approximately 50 hours of legal counsel time. And so these are just based on some estimates of time. If main table negotiations, actual meetings of both sides go on for a period of about 3 months, and there's about 25 hours of actual time at the table for the attorney, that pays for about half of that will be 25 hours, and then the other half of that amount is approximately another 25 hours for work that Labor Council would do away from the table, back in the office, doing research, putting together proposals, et cetera.
So that was gonna be my question, Bill, even in the collaborative style, we've spent money on
Okay.
preparatory
There you
work.
go.
And do we
Yeah,
have
that
enough
makes sense.
money in there for that?
So, well, can I actually, maybe it's actually a good question.
So we paid someone over the course of
Do the other budgets have this line in them as well? We don't
Oh.
put the whole thing.
They do. So that cost would be split. And there will be money in the Dover and the Sherborn budgets to supplement these funds, again,
So-
and those costs would be distributed.
So it's usually a third.
And if we look back at FY14, there was only 3,400 expended in school committee negotiations, and legal services was 35,000 that year. In case some of that work got,
I just know that.
yeah. No, I'm just saying, if you look at,
So my sense, this amount, along with what's in the Dover and Sherborn budget,
So how much
would
is,
be
are in
about.
those, have we split it a third?
No, so that, we haven't trickled that down yet. So there are some changes that are happening here that would likely have a trickle effect, so we have to make some adjustments. So I don't know, I can't answer that question now, I don't have those numbers in front of me.
So a question for next time,
Mhm.
thank you. Because that's usually how we split.
So the next proposed adjustment is a reduction of $15,000 from the legal services line. And this is based on past trends that will bring that amount to $45,000. And up through halfway, up through December 31st this year, we've expended just under $15,000 at the region, $14,999. And actually, we still have a little work to do because in fact, some of that $14,999, because at the region, we stopped the year by paying the firm a $15,000 retainer. So all the work that they do beginning July 1st gets charged to that retainer. The same is the case in Dover and Sherborn, although their retainer is $5,000. The latest invoice that we received through December 31st, it appears to me that we need to do a little work because some of those charges need to be charged to Dover and some to Sherborn. So again, being conservative, I think, based on previous 2 years, 14 and 15, and where we are so far in 16, keeping the $45,000 in there, I think, is reasonable. And in fact, Claire, in response to your other question, I was anticipating that some of that line item for school committee legal services, if it was needed for the negotiation time,
Right.
it would be available for that. The next one is $6,400 in athletic transportation, and this is part of course, another larger budget. But if you recall, the information that Mr. Parcells shared with you at the last meeting, and the information that was provided, he indicated and showed in his budget proposal that even accounting for transportation costs for the freshman girls and boys soccer program, for the JV golf. Jeff, do you want?
correct.
Anyway, the difference was $6,400.
Yes.
So if we go all in there, there's still a savings of $6,400. Health insurance, $250,000, so that goes back to the sheet that we talked about. And so a couple of things. So the new FY17, so you look to the far right-hand columns. What we now have broken down for you is a active employees' insurance costs for next year of $2,222,000. That's based on an assumption that premium costs will increase 13%.
Do we know that real number after this really next week?
Are they meeting next week? Will we know that number next week?
The
Or
steering
the
committee.
steering committee meeting?
Usually.
Good. The retiree employee cost is effectively, we're anticipating a total 4.2% increase. And the retiree rates generally are lower than the active rates. And the 626,180, we've been able to really fine tune the anticipated FY17 cost because we already know the actual cost for the first 6 months of the fiscal year. Because retiree insurance rates run from January 1st through December 31st. The Medicare that was budgeted, that stays the same, and the budgeted plan changes. So for FY16, there's approximately $195,000 in there for budgeted plan changes. That $195,000 represents 9 family plans at the Blue Cross Blue Shield plan rate. So before we get into that a little further, so what we've done is, if you look at the FY16 box, if you look at the net projected June 30, 2016, those will be the actual costs. We now know, we know of all employees who are on the plans, active, we know our retirees, so those numbers are firm, unless for whatever reason, an employee drops out or resigns. And then the Medicare, we have that number embedded in the, embedded in that number was the, those placeholder plans. So
So that 196, the 9.
Yeah.
is in there.
Right. So the FY17 projections are based on the actual number of active employees that are taking insurance now. We do not anticipate, there are no retirees, so there won't be any net impact. If we had a retiree leaving, we put them on the retiree plan, but we need their replacement to be in an active plan, so we don't anticipate that. Retired employees, again, we assume that number will be consistent, the number of retirees. And the budgeted plan change of 92, so we've made a couple of different changes in assumptions. That 92,000 represents 5 family plans, but they're based on the plan that is the most popular plan for our employees, which is not the Blue Cross plan, it's the Harvard Pilgrim? Harvard Pilgrim. And that cost of that family plan is a little less than the Blue Cross Blue Shield. And in the end, so that represents, coming up in May, there's the open enrollment period. And so this allows us to have, given that the active and the retiree funding is very tight, I mean, it's the actual, it gives us flexibility in case there are new enrollees based on open enrollment. And we understand that not every change will be a family plan. So at this point, we can look at those 5 family plans as some kind of combination of maybe 3 family plans and 4 individual plans. So it does provide us with that flexibility. So that's how we got to the proposed adjustment of $250,000.
So we want to take a break and just see if anyone on just insurance digested that, and then, okay, and then Kathy?
So I'm not sure I caught this. how many plan changes were there in FY16?
9 that were
Budgeted.
budgeted.
But what were you?
I do not know how many, if there were any actual plan changes.
Can we find that out?
We did have, yeah, we'll definitely get that information. I don't have that information in front of us, but we can find that out.
So, because I guess the 5 is an educated guess, basically. And the 9 was an educated guess, or the number you had in there was an educated guess, and now you're sort of thinking 5 is a,
The number that was
Ballpark.
in there was an educated guess.
right,
A
okay.
conservative,
A
educated
conservative
guess.
educated guess.
Because we had shared in an email that, on the towns, the town of Dover is for this year basing their, we're all on the same insurance plan, and we're basing the people that recommend what to do to the rest of us have said 12% is a reasonable estimate. So that's what's in our numbers now, and 13 is very close. So I'm not asking that to be changed, because we'll all know more, hopefully next week.
Right.
But there hasn't been a practice of putting in any dollars for plan changes. And so we've had some questions as to why they're in this budget when they haven't been in the town budgets for the last few years, and those numbers at the end of the day with the health insurance have been coming out fine. So whatever the fluctuations are, they haven't had a price tag attached to them in planning, and the actuals have looked okay. So therefore, that's the basis for me asking,
Sure.
if we need them at all. And if we do, to be able to say we do, because sometimes we have them and they've been around.
So Kathy, I think it's a very reasonable question that you ask.
Well, thank you, sir.
We've used 13%.
Yeah.
Because that was in Sherborne's advisory.
Correct.
Wasn't that Sherburne's?
Correct.
Okay, so.
Exactly,
Yeah.
so
I guess we
those,
could-
I'm not really asking
So we
about
know
that.
that,
Yeah.
Nor do we
We flipped a
include
coin.
plan changes,
And-
just to put that out there.
Yeah.
We have 13% and no plan changes, they have 12 and no plan changes.
Can I ask a question? What would you do, Kathy, if you budgeted for no plan changes and had 5? That were expensive, $92,000.
I guess probably look for money elsewhere in the budget, but, they did that the first year, they budgeted them, and the numbers, the turnbacks were so high that they've whittled them down, and the last 2 years it's been 0, and it hasn't been an issue. So if there was a real change in the whole world, in that, I guess it would need to be rethinking, but we have some data that it's actually been working fine. Get a relatively stable employee base, just like here. So if that changed, then it could be different.
So although you don't budget, were there any plan changes?
There are a couple, but it all evened out.
Right.
Yes, with employee changes, so somebody who retired
Right.
and a new person coming in picked a different plan. So yeah, there's been some small turnover in positions, but it hasn't been dollars that are needed to be addressed, basically.
That's interesting, because the retirement's not necessarily doesn't yield a savings per se
Correct,
on your health care, unlike it does on your
right.
That's
salary.
been the case in Sherburne as well, that it's balanced out.
Well, I think we've made a significant step forward.
Oh, totally,
That's-
totally.
Right, but, and something to keep in mind.
Yeah, it is, and the fact is that there are typically personnel changes from year to year outside of retirement.
Right, and we've had some of those too,
Yeah.
right.
Can I just ask a question about the timing on all of you were talking about open enrollment begins in May, I think you
I
said?
think our open enrollment typically begins in May.
And that's because the coverage begins July
Correct.
1st?
Yeah.
Okay, and so there's no remedy to that, just in terms of predictability and stability in the budget.
So I will tell you that standard operating procedure in
Right, yeah, no, I just
most
wondered,
districts,
you know.
and if I'm not mistaken, I think it's probably West Suburban, the health group, that determines when the open enrollment period is.
I just think from a payroll department standpoint, it kind of makes sense that you're going into a new year, get the compensation right, get the health care right, get the deductions right.
It's lined up with the fiscal year.
Right, yeah, it just, it's
Yeah.
off on the budget every, you know, I mean, it's not
Yeah,
your
it'd be nice if
fault.
it happened
I
in
mean,
October.
it would. It would.
Unless you're.
Okay. Utilities?
So, there's been more work done and looked at in terms of utilities, specifically the electric utilities line. There was a new contract, but given the changes and the historical spending, we believe that a $30,000 reduction is appropriate. Custodial services, contract services and supplies, you know, this is more of a bit more being a little more conservative. We have had occasions over the last couple of years where, you know, we've had emergencies that we've had to cover in the, you know, in the facilities maintenance areas. And so, so the increases in the budget over the last couple of years show that. But we are carrying and we are showing an increase of approximately, in that area, it's for expenditures. The total increase is $54,000. When you take out the salary increases, the expenditures is about $44,000. So, you know, this is perhaps a little aggressive, but it's still about $30,000 more than what is budgeted for this year. So we're putting that on the table.
So related to that, somewhere here, Bill, I can't recall where I read, wastewater treatment contracts has not been due,
Right.
and do we have an increase to cover that?
Yep, so that, in that line, we are carrying about a $6,000 increase in that line. Norfolk County retirement, so we can reduce that by $15,000. We know our cost already. We've received the assessment for next year. And so we can cover that, and we also,
And that's a discount for paying early.
Correct.
Taking advantage.
correct. So we're gonna take advantage of the discount. Insurance, property, and liability, again, based on what our previous expenditures have been. And we can cut it $13,000 in the amount of money that is remaining. We have not received those rates yet, but the amount of money remaining reflects a 15% increase, which is what Maya has indicated to us to expect. Is that correct? We do actually do our property and liability insurance through Maya. So the next two reductions are, the first is to the high school special education teacher aide salaries. So when we went through the budget and looked at our IDEA federal special education grant, which this year's $233,390, something like that. We are making the assumption that at a minimum, it'll be level funded for next year. We may see a small increase in that. So what we've done, we took our high school special ed assistants. There are no changes. We're not adding any. We need those services. And then when we looked at the middle school list, we were first pass projected the addition of 2 one-to-one assistants. Those 2 assistants would be following elementary students who are coming into the district. We realized that when we reviewed this further, we realized that one of those students we also have budgeted as a possible potential out of district placement. So we actually double budgeted the cost of services. So the $64,000 represents the reduction of one of those one-to-one at the tune of about $37,000. The remaining amount in the middle school line and the $17,000 in the high school will be able to fund through the IDEA grant. So the ID grant here is allowing us to fund about $47,000 more in those costs. So we have an alternative funding source there. So those adjustments total $501,006, and that's reflected in the line item, the version 2 line item budget, as well as the detailed breakdown of the assessment sheet. While we're on that, so this assessment sheet, and I know we'll talk a little bit more about that, Michael, that you may want to address that initially, but the assessment sheet is different in 3 ways that I indicated at the beginning of the conversation. I've been talking so long, you probably don't remember what I said. Sorry about that.
But a good teacher always then
Yes,
reads
of
what's
course.
the thing at the end of the lesson.
Summarize.
Yep.
Summarizes. So maybe it's time for that summarize.
So this assessment sheet is different from first pass assessment sheet in the 3 ways that I indicated. Chapter 70 revenue that actually shows about a $60,000 increase. Chapter 71 revenue, which unfortunately shows a decrease from FY16 of $113,000. I think when we see the House and Senate budget numbers, that number will change. But, you know, that's just me
So right
looking
now
into my
they're not-
crystal ball.
So right now in total, they're funding us in the budget less than what we are receiving this year.
About $68,000.
It's actually a net of 38.
Oh, 38, that's right, yeah, thanks. 38. And the minimum local contribution has changed from the first sheet. Sherborn's minimum local contribution under the Chapter 70 formula now, the new amount is less than what it was in the first pass, and Dover's minimum MLC has gone up, same amount. Is that right?
The Dover's, Sherman's has dropped more than Dover's has risen.
Okay. That's good.
Do we
Well,
know roughly?
Depends on your perspective.
Just be careful.
Is that logical?
That's right.
How does that make sense
We'll
though?
roll the tape.
No, I was concerned it went up the same amount as Sherburne's went down, but it hasn't, so that's.
That's what happened last
Yeah,
time.
but how does that not happen?
Yeah, shouldn't it have?
It's not a zero sum.
We don't have.
No, last time, by the time you added the 2 impacts, it became then a cumulative dollar amount.
Okay,
And it was Dover then writing a check back to Sherburne.
okay.
So it would have been the combination of what
Yeah,
went
yeah,
up
no,
or went down.
Yeah. That's fine.
Also assumed in this assessment sheet is $250,000 in E&D, so that's down from the first pass, and by $250,000. And it does not include the use of $250,000 from the Transportation Reserve Fund. That money will be spent. The reserve fund, the Transportation Reserve Fund money of $250 will be spent in FY16, and it has to be spent in FY16. You may recall that the requirements of that account as regulated by the Department of Revenue, allows districts to take whatever Chapter 71 money was unspent in one year and roll it over into that account for the next year, but whatever was rolled over must be spent in the following year. So the first $250,000 of our regional transportation bills, that money will be used to pay that. So in effect, that creates the $250,000 surplus in that line that Hans referred to earlier. when he was reviewing the monthly financials.
So it'll be directly recycled back into the variances that will impact our E&D calculation at the end of the year. And so then, whatever that number's at, will spur a discussion that will start at our next meeting around figuring out where we're projecting that number to be, what the excess is above the 5% limit, and then we will initiate the dialogue around what our options are of how to disperse that and then what combination of those options. So that could be revisiting an RTRF and putting some money there. It could be paying for capital. It could be remitting checks back to the towns. And what was the, fourth one would be using it to, in a sense, subsidize the following year's operating budget.
Are you saying that's post-budget appropriation that's going to happen, or
No,
pre?
no, I said next
Next
meeting.
meeting.
Oh,
February
sorry.
24th.
Okay,
February
okay.
4th,
At 224?
224. I
Right.
think we'll start those discussions as promised back in June when this first came up.
Right, which is why we asked if we could answer Richard's question about getting a sense of what our expected variances are gonna be, not just what's encumbered. So we can start getting our head around what we think might be positively coming back to us at the end of the year, so we can anticipate what any excess E&D might look like, and therefore what we might all want to do with it.
So this 250 here in E&D is really 250 from the transportation.
I don't wanna-
Effectively,
I
because
don't
that
wanna-
needs to come back,
I don't want to name it, it's
but that's the reimbursement from
Yes.
last year that was left over.
It's E&D,
It's E&D.
You've taken the other 500 E&D out.
correct.
Why would you do that? Just so we can explain it to people not in the room?
No, I think it can be viewed in many different ways. That's
True.
one way to interpret it.
Yeah.
Another way to interpret it is that it comes from the current E&D balance of $1.161 million.
Well, then why?
No, but the
That's
question
a
is,
different question.
instead of going from, our
750.
first round budget had 750,000.
Right.
And we're now at 250. And
Right.
to be honest, that was my request, so that because most of these numbers are going down and saying, okay, when we do our trend line budgeting, we seem to have a pretty consistent pattern in these subset of line items where we have not been spending the full budget. And so by first peeling that back, we then start at a level where we're not expecting our variances next year to be 3, 4, 5, 600,000. It would be more likely 100, 200,000. That's, I think, the goal of what we're trying to get to. We have 250,000 as a starting point of using E&D to reduce the assessments, and then we'll begin the discussion around what components of the budget should continue to be reduced and how to use E&D either for operating or those other three items. I wanted to kind of, in a sense, get a reset and then go from there.
Yeah, I understand that. My question is, if the discussion is going to take place on the 24th, is that not currently scheduled as the budget certification night, or is that not?
No, it's scheduled as
Okay.
our budget hearing night,
Okay,
so we'll do a presentation as we've often done in March. The advantage is we'll be presenting to at least a known audience of all financial committee members versus an unknown audience
right,
of the public.
yeah,
who
okay,
very rarely show up in March.
okay,
So it's our chance, as you guys requested, to pitch.
right.
And then maybe miracles of miracles will happen and we could vote a budget to be certified that night. But my hunch is this year, we may still be discussing.
Okay.
Well, and Mary, when we vote to certify, that's up high water.
Well, I
We
know, we know that.
But if you didn't vote it that night, it would be voted in March?
Yeah, we have a
March meeting, a week or two later.
Well, we need to talk about that.
Okay.
That's
We
a little bit-
will have a March, we'll have a
Early
first
March.
week of March which is currently scheduled for March 1st, and we'll have an agenda topic at the end of the meeting about that. Okay. So what I think is at least good about our current schedule laying things out is at the 24th, we'll have revisions around healthcare. We probably won't have any more information about state government, correctly, because usually the House budget doesn't come out till March. We will hopefully have a final guidance number that Sherborn committee members have all signed up to in the absence of a consistent set of numbers in the guidance document. The earlier we get that, the more opportunity we have to look at gap analysis and present documents around that.
As soon as we have it,
Yeah,
we'll have it.
that's what I said.
Yeah.
And we'll have an estimate potentially of what our excess,
Well, yeah,
what positive
and
variances might look
we'll
like.
have a new forecast, and it'll be a forecast, not a commitment around that.
And I anticipate that there will be a few more proposed adjustments in addition to those that we've reviewed tonight.
I just want to say, I think this is great progress, and I think we all really appreciate your explanation and the digging into it and the conversation and the dialogue, and feel like we're just getting a real sense of the thinking, so just thanks very much.
Yes.
Great job.
Definitely, definitely.
So working through a couple of the questions that I compiled, beyond sometime in March, do we have anything more specific about key dates from the state?
Right, so the next, I don't see the Chapter 70, 71, or MLC numbers changing at the earliest. The earliest I've ever seen the House budget come out is the first week in April. And typically it's later, it's usually mid to late April, which is well past
Useless.
the commitments that need to go forward. So there's really nothing to add at the state level. So in terms of that schedule, I think we are where we are. In terms of some potential further reductions, we continue to work with Mr. Parcells. We provided some more specific information for you in your package related to the athletic budget proposal that you saw. So in your packet is a breakdown of all of the each individual sports. Jeff has really done a fine job putting this information together, and it's a very clear, and I hate to use this word because it gets used way too much, but it's a very transparent look at the funding of our athletic department and individual sports. I know that at the last meeting, there was some discussion about the high cost of some of the sports. We have been working, Jeff has been working on relative to the girls' hockey program. The high cost is the high cost, and I personally can support those costs based on some philosophical beliefs and the fact that the circumstances for some sports are very different than others that go well beyond the means of coaches or athletes, parents, or school committee members to control. So for me, it's about fairness, but that's me. But we do get concerned when we have a situation where there may be a high-cost individual sport and our student participation is low. So that's when we really need to look at that. So there's been some work done around the girls' program, and we'll have more information, I think, more information for February 24th, but there's a possibility that we'll have a third community that will want to join our program as a co-op program. And moving forward, you'll recall one of the unique aspects of the budget, the growth budget, is our partner community for the cooperative team was providing some funding for it, but it was about a quarter of the funding, and the participation was at a 50%. So the goal going forward would be that with 3 communities, that cost would be split by a third. So that potentially would allow us to make an adjustment in the athletic budget of about $26,000. And we're looking at the possibility of proposing I always hate saying this, but a modest increase in the user fee that would increase our revenue by about $20,000. Yes, in everybody's user fee. So we'll have more complete details, but I think now would be a great opportunity if you have questions or some discussion points about the athletic budget. Jeff is here, and we're happy to engage in that conversation.
I do actually appreciate this sort of extraordinary document. It's the first time in fact we've ever had this in my 10+ years on the committee. You mentioned a bill with the hockey sense, and I'm still trying to wrap my mind around this. It looks to me as though we're subsidizing students from out of town, unless I misunderstand the budget, Jeff. We're paying more than we're getting. We're putting out more than we're getting for the on a collective basis for people who come in from out of town, and so it's hard to justify expanding it. Maybe the number will change.
If you would want to speak to also when it started and what other programs do, because it's not dissimilar to what's happening.
In regards to the girls ice hockey program, yes, the cost is pretty astronomical when you compare it to some of the other ones. The overall expenses is $39,867. The way that the previous agreement was set up with Hopkinton, it was a simple monetary amount per student that came here. So obviously that number fluctuates from year to year. The contract that was set up, it was, I believe, $1,500 per person from Hopkinton. Through conversations that I've had with John and through Bill, we're looking at changing the structure of that contract and making it more feasible that it's divided by 2 if we stay with just 1 team, or it's divided by 3 if we add the 3rd team. We did have a TVL meeting this morning, a league meeting this morning, and we have pretty good confirmation that the 3rd team will join us. They're currently in the Medway Ashland program now. So once we get that shored up, obviously I would need to bring that to the regional school committee for acceptance of having the 3rd team, and then we would apply with the MIAA to add a 2nd team to our co-op, a 3rd team to our co-op, the 2nd town. So if that happened, that would make our cost $13,289 instead of $39,867, which is a great savings. I'm not privy to why the previous contract was $1,500 per person. I will say that at my previous district, we were the host school. I mean, we were the visiting school at another school, and we paid $1,000 per person. That was just the way that was set up. So that's where we are with hockey. I think we will have that third team, or the 3rd town, which would make things a lot better financially and would make our team that much more competitive with bringing more girls into the program.
So
More the merrier.
people have been around for a long time, and I raised this every once in a while, and we don't get anywhere, and then we raise it again and not get anywhere.
Even Bernie.
Tonight.
I think there's, as I said the other night at school committee, we get to do what we want. And, if we don't think that there's any real reason to raise fees based on expenses, then we don't have to. I personally think we should. I think there actually ought to be, I think there ought to be close parity between what students are charged and what the expense is, simply because I think that's fair. I think it's fair to the parents in track and field. I think it's fair to the parents in hockey. I think it's fair to the parents in the middle. The disparity in the per athlete cost after the fee is paid, before the fee is paid and after the fee is paid, is extraordinary. I don't know if anyone else looked at it, but it's on the order of 250, 300, a factor of 250 to 300 times. I cannot imagine a justification for that. I understand not everything costs the same, not everything should cost the same, but there really ought to be some effort to balance things. That's me. I hear Bill mention the increasing of fee. I cannot imagine doing that for track and field and cross country sports, which are essentially free after we collect the fees already. And I cannot imagine that the fee will go up enough to make me at least any more comfortable about our higher expense ones, not just girls hockey, but our way of boys hockey as well. We're paying over $1,000 a kid to teach tennis. It's not very much money in aggregate, and it just seems crazy to me that we should be asking our taxpayers to be paying that kind of money for relatively small numbers of athletes. We've got, what is 850 odd roster spots. Almost 20% of the budget goes for about 50 kids. I don't think that's fair, and I think we ought to do something about it.
I actually, see, I have a very different philosophy about it, which is that we're a public school, and therefore, I think it's actually unfair to have different prices for different kids in a public environment where it is cheap to have, or relatively cheap compared to having a hockey field. It's relatively cheap to have a soccer field. It can also be used as a bunch of other things versus having a swimming pool or a hockey field, which are somewhat prohibitive capital expenses that it doesn't really make sense for us to build here. And so you do end up outsourcing it. And so it does end up being, it is more expensive to send kids out to do it, but as a public institution, I feel like there's at a certain point, yes, if there's 2 kids participating, then you say should we really be offering this type of sport. But we're also not talking about very esoteric sports. We're talking about pretty mainstream sports for this area of the country. And as a public institution, I feel like there's a baseline of opportunities that we as a school of this caliber should be offering our kids. And I can't, going back to the public part of it, I don't think it's right to be charging kids different fees for those different activities when they have different startup costs that should be borne by us, not by them.
So Michael, I have a totally different take on this.
Please share.
So fees, there's only a limited number of fees that we can charge. We have a student activity fee, we have a parking fee, we have an athletic fee. Those are our vehicle to raise additional funds. Historically, we have never tied that fee to any one activity. So if I, as a student, play ping pong and I pay $275, that doesn't go to the ping pong team. It goes to the operating budget. So in terms of whether we raise a fee or what that fee is, to me it's the same kind of discussion we have and we'll have about school lunch and other things that we can charge. What is the market rate for that? What is the appropriate rate for us to be charging a family or a student to participate in this instance, in sport. And, you know, if the administration come back and they've done analysis that it's appropriate for us to relook at that, I'm open to looking at it. I like Carolyn, feel that when we go down you're gonna pay more for this sport because that's an expensive sport, we've then taken away the whole reason we're charging the money in the first place is it's the only place we can charge fees.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that last sentence.
So by tying that to that specific sport, like you play hockey, so you're gonna pay a $500 activity fee because that sport's expensive. But that's not the reason we're collecting the money.
Or
To pay for hockey.
to add to that, we charge for parking because we can charge for parking, not because we necessarily decided that it costs us $350 a year per student to occupy a space. So I think you're saying it's a general revenue. I guess Mike, add a fourth way to look at it. If it was a new sport, we put new sports through a very significant amount of grilling around expenses and how many are going to participate. And while we don't add it up, in our heads, we're probably adding up what is the subsidy before we say yes. And so, again, I've at least experienced that with the indoor track and field team. And so I don't think it's unreasonable from time to time to say, are there any sports that should go under a review for whether it meets that criteria? Would we accept it if it was a sense to read like? And how does it fit within our budget priorities? So again, I don't necessarily think that going down a split fee route is a good way to go, but I do think it's reasonable from time to time because participation interest levels change. I mean, potentially when the tennis program initially was started up, or in the 70s, it probably had 3 times as many kids. And we needed more courts and stuff. So I think, again, it's just a sports interests come and go. You know, in 10 years, who knows if girls lacrosse will have as many kids. Sorry, Dana. Oh, it will, because Dana's done such a good job of building up the program in these towns.
So is it fair to say that, Jeff, you've started that process and you are looking at these sports with a keen eye of trying to find ways? Like, I like what you've done with the girls' hockey. I, like Richard, I'm kind of aghast that we would increase the fees for something like cross-country when there is a few number of girls doing hockey and it is such an expensive sport.
Sure.
But it sounds like you've tried to put some analysis to this, the cost-benefit analysis, to see if there are ways that you can make this a little bit more palatable.
Right now, that's really our only sport where we could even get approval for another team. The MIA will not approve co-ops unless there is a need for you to have an extra town or more people to participate. The next sport that's probably the most limited is swimming. Our numbers are down a little bit in swimming compared to previous numbers. And, you know, that could be something that I could look at as well. But it's not as simple as saying, we'll take another town in. There has to be a need for it. Or it will not get approved through the MIAA, which is obviously our governing body for athletics.
Thank you.
So I do have one other thing on the athletic budgets, the ACAD. So the new positions bill, we need to go through, and we have plenty of time.
Yep.
But I'm just reminding. We have John and Scott right now, they're on that. To set the ratio for the new positions. So that we don't approve it.
I appreciate the reminder because that's
It's easily
That's
forgotten.
important.
It's easily forgotten.
right.
But there are a few new coaches.
Right.
I don't even know if they may already exist, so they may not be filled. And have a ratio already, I didn't look that up.
And it wouldn't be a financial meeting if I didn't find one number that I was concerned about. So on your tennis sheet, you have 6 participants in each sport, girls and boys. And on the census, we had last year 24 boys and 16 girls.
The reason that there's 6 there is because that could potentially be a student that's already reached the cap, family cap. So if you notice, the spring numbers are a little low.
Right.
Because by the time you get to the spring, they've already reached their fee cap, or their family cap. We have so many, we have a lot of students that, families that have 3 people within the high school, so they've already reached their cap.
Right,
And,
so,
and that is one where, in the context of fees, I would be as much interested in revisiting the family cap as the per sport cost,
Sure.
and see whether what is the best place to address accessibility to our sports relative to family income, rather than a blanket rule which may or may not fit. You have 3 kids and there are 3 sport families each, that's just a preference of your family versus, those of us who've gone down the music route or something.
right, which is why it's dangerous to just take those numbers and divide it by the numbers that are in there, because those are the fee numbers and not the census numbers.
If I can, I'll make a last point and I'll shut up. Claire and I have had this disagreement for a long time, obviously, about,
Especially around hockey.
what fee, no, I don't pick on hockey, it just happens to be the most expensive. If fees are not to be considered to be offsets for their sports, that's a philosophical question. I don't think that it's the right way to do it. But let's imagine that they're not. Do we think that spending $2,000 an athlete for a single sport, for a single season, is the right use of taxpayer money? I just do not think it is. I think it's, I cannot justify it to my constituents. I can't vote for a budget. I have no.
So is it?
I
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to, the one thing that I think, which goes back, I think Carolyn alluded to this, embedded in these numbers is a distinction between facilities we have and facilities we don't. And if you do an analysis of how much we're subsidizing each team, it is absolutely correlated to whether we have a facility for that or not. So, and we started this philosophical conversation last time, and I don't think we're going to resolve it right now, but is it fair to unduly burden a student because we don't have a hockey rink, a swimming pool, the outside golf course where we're using outside facilities versus ones where we do, or we have fields that are being used by multiple. So it's tied up in the same philosophical.
Well, and can I just add to that for 1 second? And therefore, economically, technically, if you want to look at the true cost of the sport, you should add then into the sports that we have here, the cost of maintaining the track, the cost of maintaining, I mean, that, if you're gonna look at the cost of going to the hockey rink, then you also have to look at the true cost of having a field here.
Right,
And so it's not as.
I understand exactly what you're saying, Caroline, and I would be willing to be proved wrong, but the first time I ever did that analysis, it doesn't add that much because it's spread out over so many. It's just not that great. And that's the nature of your choices. We've chosen not to build squash courts. We've chosen to build soccer fields because that's what we've done. We've chosen not to build a hockey rink. That doesn't mean that there's no consequence to that choice. I'm afraid we're in a situation in which there's no consequence within the borders of the school.
So may I propose at this point, since we've set the table for this discussion, we have information coming in relative to evaluating fees and some thoughts on that. Will we know anything definitive about changes in the hockey co-op structure by February 24th?
Probably not, to be honest with you, because they would have to get approval first before I bring it to you.
Since we do have a relationship with Hopkinton, when would we float the idea of a different cost sharing arrangement?
Already have, I did that today.
Okay.
And they, meaning their athletic director, obviously understands the situation that we're in. They know that we have a limited roster, number-wise. There's no guarantee of how many new students are coming up with our graduating students and so forth. So I'm at a situation now, and I've spoken to John about this, where I think it's imperative that we have a third town, or we may not be able to run the program regardless, just due to lack of numbers. So I think it's really, we have to move forward.
So is there a possibility for you to even find out through the Hopkinton, either high school principal or superintendent, whether they would even entertain that fee structure change? Because if they don't think they could get approval for that, we may have another committee make that decision for us.
I can definitely work on that, absolutely.
So we'll table this portion of the budget for now to come back on the 24th. I was quickly scanning through other questions. I still think there's, oh, sorry. Oh, are there more?
Are they done? Any other athletic questions?
Yeah, I think so.
Just so they know.
All right.
Yeah.
They both have a lot of it, right?
Yes.
Other activities?
Thank you all.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Sue. Thanks, Jeff.
Working our way, line items, 2210, which was, 2220, which was curriculum leadership and department heads. I think there's still a confusion between the dollars in there relative to the comments in the sides. Page 2 in our budget, line item 2220. Curriculum leadership and department heads. It's a growth of 14.4% from FY16, but all that's notated is the 1.6% ratio based on.
Yeah, I don't have a definitive answer at this time,
Okay,
but we're looking at that.
so we'll keep that on our list to revisit.
Right, the original assumption was that the difference is that the fine and performing arts department head, the nurse leaguer, so the Sherborn share, the Dover-Sherborn, the regional share of the addition of the performing arts department chair, the nurse leaguer. No, because that, the stipend piece didn't change with that.
They got more time off.
I already had it because it was the department chair.
Oh, okay.
Right, yeah.
So are we thinking those changes did not make it into the FY16 budget?
Correct. That's what we're.
Okay, so that's what we're going back and doing research on.
Yeah, we're just
Which
trying to
would
confirm
explain. Okay,
Exactly.
yeah. Fair enough. Does that help you guys as well?
Yeah.
Because I know that was on your
Yeah.
list. In the acronyms, we are still curious about LPTA.
It should be LFTA. There are a few acronyms above that one. It's a,
Got it.
so,
So it's travel and we should probably be moving away from LFTA anyways.
yeah.
So that's another thing.
It's the old moniker of living, fine, and technical arts. Yeah, so that's right, and just, I forgot to mention this with the insurance, but the intention will be, when the budget is all complete and we're redoing this, we're, for the insurance, for example, we're going to be separating those components out into separate line items. So the Medicare payment will have a separate line item. There's a line item there now, I don't know why it's not budgeted there, but we'll have a retiree line and we'll have an active line, so that we can start tracking that over time. And, changes, like we just mentioned, for the LFTA, those are the kind of changes we'll be going back and reviewing and trying to make those adjustments. And I'd also like to make changes, for example, the school committee negotiations and the school committee legal services. The line items that are common, especially the shared costs across the 3 towns, it would be helpful if the 3 budgets all use the same language.
It's particularly problematic
I don't know.
in business,
Right.
the shared business resources.
So-
'Cause that confused the heck out of me.
They don't. No, some do, but some do not. And so, but that's a process we'll go through once the budget's been approved. We just want to make sure we do it and be able to retain the integrity of being able to look at previous year's expenses and compare them across line items. Because once you make line item changes in names, it makes that process a little harder. So we need to think through that. Sorry, I didn't.
And then, fortunately, going back, I think there was still an outstanding question on line item 2210, which is school leadership costs. The subline was
Other services, high school
other services, comparing the 15,000 expended in FY15 to a current run rate, current budgeted amount of 25,000.
Right. So in 14, the expended amount was much closer to the budgeted amount. So far this year, we've expended almost half of that amount, and there are probably no encumbrances or expenditures drawn for graduation yet.
That's correct.
So we still have those expenditures. Again, trying to go back to the FY15 budget and identify the items that were charged to that particular line. It may very well be in this case that there were some expenditures for whatever reason that should have been charged to that line, were charged to a different line.
Thank you. And we talked about wastewater treatment facility. We still have a contract that needs to go out for bid. And so we've got some provision there to support that. That's line 4410.
Right, so line 4410 and 4110.
I mean, 4110.
Hans did provide some information in the packet
Oh, okay.
related to those 2 lines. It's in the big agenda item 5 packet.
Now, that covers my consolidation of people's questions. Does that feel like we're honing these down?
Who knows? I mean,
You've been
no,
submitting them.
I have. If you say you've answered them, I'll take your word for it. I don't have them with me tonight.
You don't have I thought you would have been checking them off as I was going along. I'm disappointed.
I've been checking them. Level service, are you still working on a level service comparison for us?
Yes.
In
Yeah.
process?
Yeah.
Okay,
That is in
Which
process.
great. Yeah.
That's what we were just clarifying today, so we could build the right.
Perfect. So that's, I think, our only
Exhibit.
remaining question. I
Yeah.
have checked ours.
That's the big
So for
one.
the rest of you guys, what they were asking for is, I don't know if you recall last year, one of our exhibits was what is new. And so one of the questions that Michael asked today was, what is considered level service? If you have a lot, let's just say, if you have a lot more kids in an athletic program and your athletic budget goes up, is that level funded because we needed more coaches to do the same thing? And that was the question. And then the response was, we'd still like to see what the individual increases are, and then the explanation would be because there are more kids doing something.
Okay.
So Michael, we have in here
Thank you,
the salary. Are you gonna talk
The shared,
Are you gonna talk to this bill? I just had
I wasn't going to talk to it, but please ask
Just
questions.
Yeah, why don't we go on
I just had a quick question.
question list?
And I'm not even getting into the sheets with this. On the finance department chair, 2 stars, you put stipend and .2 release time. Is there extra money for that release time? Is that what that's insinuating? Or is it just, are we noting she now has release time?
No, what we're, there's, well,
There's an additional.
this would have to be clarified, but
And you can do it later.
no, she was, it's the actual cost of a .2 FTE position that's teaching what she was
Would it otherwise have been?
teaching when she was full-time.
Yes.
Right. Right, so that cost is a,
So where is that
Yeah,
cost
so why are we putting that?
shown down?
Why isn't it just showing up?
That's somebody's salary, it's gotta be in the teacher's salary.
It should be in the
Mine, right
teacher's
now.
line here, and are we pitching?
Double counting.
Double counting.
Take that.
we'll, no, that's a good observation. We'll look at that.
I'm quite sure what that is.
But we'll, yeah.
And then I just need a reminder, the teachers,
I'm sorry.
the teachers have a 1.6% increase if you're on the last step.
Correct.
The other units have.
Step increases. Oh, so,
The bargaining units.
yes, so, the educational assistants, have
That's on this year, 1.5%.
Oh, right, okay. That's the
I
EAs.
think,
And then
no,
the
I
other
think that's
stuff.
on, that's on.
oh, and you
Salary
look at the salary analysis, sorry. Thank you, Richard.
Yeah, okay.
It's in.
2% for administrative assistants, 2% for students. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
So what's the, tell me the question. EAs?
No, I was just trying to put the whole landscape together, that we're
Yep.
giving two to the administration, 1.6 to the 60%.
Because I'm making a list of stuff.
And then I was trying to figure out what everyone else was getting. And now that I see that,
We should compare.
So the,
In our meeting, when we approved the contracts,
yeah, so all I can tell you is that in the EA contract, the EA1 and EA2 positions, hourly rate is identified as being increased by 1.8%, and the EA3 is 1.5. I don't know why there was a difference, but
I thought that there was a target to reach a certain percentage, but it was really off for the predecessor superintendent to negotiate the contract. He thought he could negotiate. And I don't think at that point we,
usually we're trying to more be in every line, not all of us.
but I think that would have cropped out of, I think we gave Steve a lot of autonomy to finish those agreements, wasn't it?
Yeah, I know. It just, it didn't make some issues there.
appreciate it being brought to my attention.
I actually do have a question, but I'm not sure if this is the appropriate forum or time to bring it up. When, at the joint meeting the other night, there was some reference made to possible further reorganization in the sped department, and that covered all. So I'm just wondering if that is,
That will be brought on February 24th.
Okay.
But it's, what we're going to do is we're going to take off the table the .6 administrative assistant
okay,
for next year.
okay,
We're going to explore other ways that we can provide Terry with the administrative assistant support she needs.
okay.
It may be back on the table next year at this time,
I'll be waiting.
once we go through, I know you will, so, just wanted to give you an early warning.
I'm writing that down, that we discussed that.
But we've
Yeah,
talked
but,
that
yeah.
through, so
I just wanted to know if it was.
that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. Thanks.
So do we feel we have done a good job of covering agenda item number 5?
Pretty good.
Okay. And it's still before 9 p.m. Yeah, no, that was not an encouragement. And we are, for now, going to table agenda item number 6.
Please, until the March 1st meeting, if
And
that's
I'll
okay.
I have a very quick question.
No, they will at a future meeting. We just need to work out those logistics.
But that was capital related, not operating.
No, I know,
Just-
that's why, I meant to bring it up with the capital and then we just.
I think we're ready to move on to the consent agenda, item number 7. I just need to find that. You have that? Packet? Yeah, that's my packet. So we have approval of minutes for January 5th. We have a overnight trip request and a Dover-Sherborn sailing fundraiser. Are we comfortable handling all those as a consent? Sounds like that. So then, do we have a second? All in favor? Okay. Communications, we had minutes from other school committees. We have a item that came up in an email from Carolyn regarding a schedule conflict for March 1st. So on March 1st, we have a regional school committee meeting planned. At the same time, we have which speaker from?
Just the lady.
Jason.
No, Denise.
No, just the
This
ladies.
is May, yeah, it's just the lady.
May 5th.
Graduate.
Yes, she-
Graduate.
So we have somebody from the Challenge Success Program coming out, or is it our sponsor or our local?
They are sponsoring, Challenge Success is sponsoring this, but she is a former DS alum who is the author, blogger, and is the author of The Gift of Failure.
Okay.
So she is going to be speaking to our students, our faculty, and then have a parent forum that evening. And I think the next evening she is in Native. I know that there was a question because of this particular meeting as well. There's also another conflict on any other date that we could have brought her in. We had another conflict with, it was that, but there was another thing, it had to do with town drama.
That's the May one.
So do we know if wherever she's presenting, we would have the ability maybe to tape it? And would we have her permission to do so?
We certainly could ask her. I would think that that would be a real possibility, that we could ask her that.
Because my proposal, since it's not the formal presentation of the Challenge Success Program like occurred last year,
Yeah, no, it was.
and I think it would be helpful for us to see, some of us attend and even see how parents engage on this topic, that I would vote for, particularly if we can get it taped, to continue with our schedule on March 1st. And we always have that potential opportunity to wrap up financial things on the 24th, and we get time off for good behavior potentially.
Mr. Lee, I could also
Yeah.
just pose, if any members of the regional school committee wanted to come at the time when they were presenting for our faculty, I
That's
think that would be
fantastic.
fine.
That'd be
So
awesome.
that might be an opportunity. Let me just confirm with
Okay.
her, and then I will communicate with the superintendent.
That'd be great.
That's
Thank you.
Yeah.
great brainstorming.
Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome.
Great idea, John.
And you won't offend us if you're at the presentation and not here. I'll let you guys figure that out, but.
Depends on how the 24th goes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Work that through.
We talked about how we were intending to structure the February 24th meeting. Do we have any input from anyone here about key things that we may have not already thought about, or issues that we should?
So just, I think we need to, you guys can give some thought, we don't have the answers, to how you structure a hearing, the chance to answer Warren advisory's questions, and then we've all said tonight there are things that we want to discuss. And do we as the region need to have a 45-minute pre-meeting to have time to do that? And John and Scott have a part of that, or? So,
We can do that.
yeah.
So,
You guys figure that out?
so what are types of items you feel like we would want
So
to?
today we punted quite a few things, like the third split on negotiation costs, the closeout of the 1415, what's the actual healthcare number, plan changes, those kind of things, just sort of cleaning up where we are
So
with our
we'll,
budget.
we'll think that through meeting design, whether some of those things should occur prior to starting the public meeting, or
Well-
we stay in session after we complete the
And
meat
we
of
do
the
that.
meeting with,
I don't think
Yeah.
we asked John this
So could I ask, if it would be helpful, certainly for me, if you could remind me of those items in an email, and if anyone else has something specifically,
I mean,
and then when Dana, Michael and I meet, we can.
for the
we'll have a better
24th,
sense of that.
what is if we were to meet before, because we meet at 7 in the Dover Great Hall is the actual three-way conversation. That is where we're meeting, Dover Great Hall. How early could we convene if we wanted to do a meeting before that? Is 6 o'clock too early, or do you want to look at?
I don't think I'm available, I also don't work on it.
I just
let's confirm, could people make 6:30? And we'll figure out if we do need to do that, we'll
Okay.
figure out a way to make that happen in 30 minutes.
Okay.
'Cause I don't think we have things that are,
That's fine. So I would say if you can block out 6 o'clock on your calendar, and maybe we do 6:30, but at least we'll block that out for us.
So do you need a venue in the town hall to do that?
Um,
So you can let me know, Dana? We
Okay.
can just try and help you find a spot?
that would be
Great. We can, Cheryl can probably call and see if the selectman's office is open
Yeah.
at 6.
So what's the Great Hall?
The big hall.
Okay, but there's always that other little room.
Yeah,
too.
that's the selectman's office. I mean,
Oh,
So that-
selectmen's meeting room,
Oh,
sorry,
okay.
selectmen's meeting room.
That'll be an open meeting though, right?
Yes, oh yeah,
Okay. So you'll let us know what you decide?
oh yeah.
That would be great. Yeah, they may not need the whole big room, because people will be coming in if they want to have a conversation, they might do it on the side.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Can I take care of the posting requirements there?
Yes.
Cheryl and I have been through that, newspaper ads have been purchased.
Yes, we're all for.
We keep our local papers in publication mode for another year. Anything else? Then I motion to adjourn.
Oh, wow, well done.